strong similarities in terms of culture, consumer spending behavior, infrastructure connectivity. So the 5 countries I picked here, Myanmar, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia, they are the most populated. They are the usual suspects, I would say, when we see a venture capital expansion deck for Southeast Asia, with the first countries for a startup to set up in. At least a few or all of these countries will be in the decks, right, after a Series A funding, for example. So we're looking at the urban population here. This is a prime target for B2C products or services. So I wanted to give you an idea of the market size and where Thailand is compared to our neighbors. Aside from that, if we look at another macro metric, which is interesting, is the digital economy. Looking at the 2020 Huda report, Thailand had 75% internet penetration. So that's 57 million active internet users. The Thai population is extremely connected. Last year, the government doubled the capacity for submarine cables, and they set up a new cable between Thailand and Hong Kong, which led to a lot of improvements in internet speed. I think everybody can see that this brings added value in what we call the new normal. To dig a bit further into this, this is a slide extracted from the same report for this year. We can see that Thailand has 52 million internet users, but in fact, if we also count SIM cards and duplicates, there are 93.3 million internet subscriptions as of last year. So there are actually more registered internet users than people living here. And they are spending about 9 hours per day online. Now, what is specific to Thailand is almost all is done through smartphone. 97% of the user access internet from their phone. The #1 social app in terms of online spending volume is Line. The e-commerce lead is a website called Lazada. So I just wanted to show this slide as it's a market that seems easy to reach, right? So, but again, how do we compare to our neighbors? So I'm not looking at the percentage here. Yeah. I'm looking at the absolute numbers, so the market size, right? So this is the size of the audience that you can pretty much reach online with an online app. So if we look at the percentage now, and Thailand is at 75, why is it ahead from a lot of its neighbors? I think one of the answers is there's been a push with government digitalization, starting in 2016 under the National Digital Economy Master Plan. The government installed free Wi-Fi hotspots in almost 25,000 villages across the country through public-private partnership with telco operators. And they created a broadband network, national broadband network, connecting also schools and hospitals. So this is why, even though Thailand is quite a binary territory structure, so you have Bangkok and provinces, but the internet penetration is quite high, and that's a market that's easy to reach. Quick caveat here, I want you guys to be careful about one thing. What I see is some of our clients have an expectation gap on the human resource side for the The talent is here in Thailand, but it's not that easy to reach. LinkedIn, for example, has just 2.7 million user base, and there is no direct in-country competitors. So we often hear that the market entry must be somewhat delayed because our clients haven't yet found the right talent or they're having trouble through it. So take that into account in your business plan. And I recommend, of course, that you use a strong recruitment firm like our host today, Talentvis. This slide, I wanted to show you economic stability. So if you see the indicators I'm using, I'm not using the boilerplate GDP numbers and so on. I'm trying to handpick some indicators that give you an idea. This one is for economic stability. You always hear the Thai economy is resilient. So how is that? Let me show you. In this slide, and I'm sorry it's a bit heavy, but I just wanted to show you the green trend line here. So the current GDP is 543 billion US. And over the past 10 years, the GDP growth was ranged between 1 to 8% each year. But what you're looking at here is the GDP per capita, and I've stretched it back another 10 years. So it gives you an idea of the actual spending power of the population. And you can see the little stars here are crisis events which happen, like the tsunami and different events that impacted the economy. Despite all these events, the consumer spending power sustained about 5% growth year on year on average over 20 years. It has had a sustained growth. The headline inflation, which is the little bars you're seeing at the bottom here, is also well under control. The currency is well managed. So what I'm trying to show you here is, even though the Thai economy, so it's largely driven by private sector, framed by government programs and incentives, it has been struggling through crisis one after the other. And I'm sure you will not find a lot of countries with this kind of sustained growth trend line and two regime changes in it. There is a sustained growth year on year, and this is quite specific to Thailand. And this is why you will hear it is a resilient economy. You see, most of our clients would open foreign subsidiaries. Typically, they consolidate the revenue at group level to the stock exchange or to the stakeholders. And they would ask our accountants here in TMF to prepare IFRS or US GAAP accounting, group reporting. Now, for companies which are CapEx hungry, like manufacturing, for example, investing in capitalizing a foreign subsidiary means taking a foreign exchange risk. You're going to put money there to work in the country. And investing in a country which has shown stability and resilience in times of crisis, and has a track record also of not debasing its currency through inflation, this is a competitive advantage. And this is one of the strengths that Thailand has in the region. Moving on. Just to add on that point, I wanted to quickly show you this slide. This is courtesy of the Thai Stock Exchange. It shows how the Thai listed companies performed on the day of the COVID market crash in February, right? So they are comparing all the other listed companies in the world, Thai companies, and they are sorted by market cap and industry. You can see in the white column before the crash back in December, and on 28th February after the crash. The Thai companies, despite the global flight to safety, Thai companies maintain their ranking. So I wanted to show again that there's a strong private sector here. If we zoom out a little bit, I want to talk to you about the ease of doing business report from the World Bank. That is a reference benchmark published by the World Bank every year. The cutoff is in May normally. They gather data from 190 countries. They look at indicators on business regulation, protection of property, paying taxes, contracts enforcement, etc. That report is looked at by every advisory firm. It's basically a benchmark for red tape, right? So you can see Thailand ranks 21 out of 190 countries, the last report. And this is very important. A single point up or down in that report could impact the decision made by companies and the FDI bottom line for the governments. So they take it very seriously. And we can see Thailand has made quite a substantial jump from 46 in the past years to 21. So let's take a look at this. Yeah, so these are some of the indicators used by the World Bank. So you can see starting a business, paying taxes, getting credit, etc. They use a very broad brush. It's both B2B and B2C or their motto is, how can we do business better, faster, and cheaper? And Ease of Doing Business Steering Committee has been doing an amazing job here. What I've seen in the past 10 years is they've cut so much red tape. Some examples would be they remove the requirement for a company seal, so you don't need a company stamp anymore in Thailand. They bundled all the different tax numbers into a single number per company. A lot of things moved online, company registration, tax filing, custom clearance. They also reduced in 2018 the incorporation time of a rep office from 6 months to 1 week, right? And another practical example also is they remove the prison sentences attached to work permit, certain work permit offenses, such as working in the wrong category or the wrong job description, which is not consistent with the work permit. That was giving cold feet to a lot of executives. They identified it and they removed that. So they're making a lot of efforts, and this is why they have successfully increased the ranking here. This is just a few examples, but there were many more reforms under the Ease of Doing Business framework. The World Bank concludes that the incorporation time in Thailand used to take 27.5 days for a limited liability company, and now it's just 4.5 days. So it's a significant improvement. But I'm not 100% happy with that timeline. I think we have to manage expectations as well. So this is what I'm going to come to in my notes. For that, accounting and tax, very basically, this is a broad summary of the accounting and tax obligations and procedures in Thailand, right? So VAT, Thailand has a blanket VAT system, so there is no adjusted rate, 7% reduced from 10%. Withholding tax, be aware, as withholding tax here applies on services, both domestic, outbound, and abroad. So in a country like Singapore, you would only be charged outbound service transactions. But in Thailand, it applies to all service transactions, including domestic. Sorry, can everyone please put the speaker on mute? Right. For corporate income tax, Thailand has a 20% rate, but it can be reduced for an enterprise or waived through certain licenses like BOI. And you can see on the right-hand side, I always take a regional approach. So I look at the corporate income tax in Asian as well, right? So you can see where Thailand ranks compared to the other countries. Sorry, is everybody on mute here? I think I can hear someone.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, no, just going very quickly through tax obligations, withholding tax, VAT, corporate income tax, social security. That is the government safety net for maternity, death benefit, child and old age, unemployment, etc. The tax is 10%, with 5% from the employer and 5% from the employee, levied from the salary, with a cap at 1,500 baht. And then you have the accounting and filing obligations. I don't want to kill you by PowerPoint by going through every point. Just one thing you should be careful about. Thailand has not yet converged with IFRS. So those of you who are doing bookkeeping centrally through a shared service center, you will still need to hire a local bookkeeper to maintain local GAAP accounting and bookkeeping, which is what we do for a lot of our clients here. Moving on. So incorporation procedures. First, I'll start with the positive points is you do not need a resident director like you would have in Singapore, in Vietnam, or in Myanmar, for example. For most setups, you do not need a registered corporate secretary like you would have in Hong Kong, or a registered treasurer like you would have in the Philippines. There is no need anymore for company seal unless required by the company from a governance standpoint. The AGM and board of directors meetings can be now done remotely since recently, and most of the tax filings can be done online, some with extended deadlines when it's filed online. So it has been simplified. If we look at the timeline here, this is the detail of the incorporation procedure, times and government costs. So this is extracted from the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, right? So you can see again here, the timeline is very shortened, right? Just a few days. And at a first glance, it seems very straightforward. I just want to mention a few hurdles here. First of all, the VAT registration, which is the number 4, will require you to have a physical address. It cannot be done through a virtual domiciliary address, right? So you will need to hire or set up a physical address. Providers like Regis or JustGo would have some very inexpensive packages for that, but you need to take that into account. To register memorandums of association, these will need wet signatures. And therefore, you will need all the stakeholders, promoters, and directors to sign on the same form. So this will go at the speed of FedEx, right? You need to take that into account also if they are located in different places in the world. Maybe lastly, the bank account opening, point 2. A lot of banks will require the director to be here in person for the KYC process. So this is not the case for international banks, where they can arrange that through the foreign branches. And also some local banks like Bangkok Bank, for example, they do have branches in London, New York, and other places. And they have in the past helped us to facilitate this process for clients who were not actually in Thailand. So they could do this remotely. Now, there's a bit of a caveat and something I would like to mention. The timeline I presented earlier applies for a majority Thai-owned company, and that's one of the small prints. As a foreign company, there will be some additional steps that come into the way of operational readiness. Thailand has some protectionist laws in place restricting market access to foreigners and foreign companies under the Foreign Business Act framework. It restricts foreign business ownership in certain activities, but it also cascades into the labor laws with employment quotas for foreigners, job restrictions, etc. So I will not expand too much on this because Mr. D from Price and who's presenting after me, will be covering this. But I just wanted to show you how it may impact to some extent the timeline and what you should anticipate. Right, so looking at this, you would probably want to see which type of entity is the most suited for your operation here. And then you want to look at different avenues, different venues to reach 100% foreign ownership. So the confusion sometimes comes from the fact that there are different types of licenses that you can apply. Typically, when talking to a CFO or a compliance director, they want to know how long it's going to take, how much, and what documents they need, right? They have a client to invoice in Thailand, or an RFP to sign, or staff to hire. And they just want to know how long it's going to take to get the structure set up to reach that point. And the answer can be, it depends. It's a frustrating answer, and it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes, but it depends on which license will apply to the setup, right? The license may depend on the business activity, on the hiring plan, the capital expenditure, the transfer technology to locals, the nationality of the investors as well. If you look at bilateral treaties, Thailand has bilateral treaties applicable for example, with Australia, Japan, or the US that would facilitate this. So it can sometimes be a bit frustrating because when a client comes in with the expectation that it's going to be done all in 4 days, and then we start getting into these discussions, it can be a bit of a shock. So the go-to-market timeline sometimes can be increased dramatically from these licenses, or there are other type of licenses like the Board of Investment, for example, which facilitates a lot and make it very speedy. So as a foreign-owned company, you need to be aware that even though you can set up the company and open the bank account and get the structure ready in just a few days, you will need to have proper licensing before generating revenue here in Thailand, right? So be aware of timeline expectations when you draft your business plan and receive proper counsel on FDI structuring in terms of what structure and what license you would need. We're going to look a little bit at the BOI, the Board of Investment, which is the last option on the deck here, and is the most commonly used here in Thailand. So taking a look at FDI broadly, the Bank of Thailand monitors metrics for FDI, right, from a capital inflow perspective. But what is more relevant here is the government agency called the Board of Investment, which is actively promoting and offering incentives to investors. And you can see they promoted 1,624 projects last year, valued over 756 billion baht, right? The Board of Investment is an agency, government agency, was created, I think, over 50 years ago, and it now reports directly to the Prime Minister's office. So on this slide, I'll just tell you a bit more about the BOI, but I wanted to show you a timeline. So you can see 43 months here. So this is not the actual timeline, it's the maximum possible timeline and deadlines. In practice, it can be done a lot faster, depending on the project investment side, sometimes in just a month, right? But I just wanted to tell you a bit more about the BOI. Their role is to promote the investment here, both into Thailand, but also to help Thai companies invest overseas. They have offices, I think, in 13 countries now. They have a marketing budget, KPIs and investment each year. So the role may be similar to what you would see in Indonesia, maybe with the BKPM, or in the Philippines, where there is also a similar government organization called the BOI as well. To promote investment, the Board of Investment would offer a range of tax and non-tax incentive based on the project merits. The applicants would also have facilities to apply visa, work permit, etc. Price Sanan, the law firm presenting after me, will tell you more about this. But essentially, the Board of Investment Office interlinks with many government departments. The officers are most helpful, and they are usually the one-stop center for foreign investors coming to Thailand, right? They are also very reactive. During the COVID epidemic, they could immediately ease restrictions and offered fast-track applications for pharma companies. for vaccines testing or importing of masks and so on. So although I have found that the most important benefit for investors considering a market entry is to own 100% of the company. This is often a sine qua non requirement for stock-listed companies where they are required to maintain majority control on all their subsidiaries. So the tax and non-tax benefits, the other benefits are a plus, absolutely. But the BOI is very often, the major value and the first client-facing point for investors coming to Thailand. Now, just to end on a positive note here, I wanted to show you this slide. So these are targeted industries. You see, to ensure that the Thai economy keeps growing over the next 20 years, they have a 20 years plan. The Thai government adopted a new economic model called Thailand 4.0, which is focused on transforming Thailand into a value-based economy built upon science, technology, innovation, creativity. You can see the different activities here. So these are target industries with high potential, which have been identified as the new engines of growth to drive the economy into the future, right? So if some of you on the call here operate in one of these industries, I would definitely encourage you to consider Thailand as the base for your Southeast Asia operations, as you will receive a lot of extensive government support when it's setting up the subsidiary here. So with that, I think I have concluded my part of the presentation. I will give the floor back to our presenter, Kun Duangkamon.
Hello, yes. So now thank you, Thomas. And we will go to the next speakers, Mr. Sopon from Praisanon. He will be discussing all the key legal concerns when you start a business in Thailand. Sopon, are you ready?
Yes, so I'm sharing my slides here. Do you see my slide?
Not yet. It's still, yeah. Okay, now it's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for Talentvis team for having me here. And also thank you, Thomas, for the overview pictures about Thailand. And today, with about 20 minutes, I would propose you to see the key legal concerns when starting a business in Thailand. And a little bit, this presentation is an overview and guideline of the key legal concern. So it's not the legal advice. This is a share the best practice and for you to see the whole picture of the legals that I picked for you. So the first of questions I really would like all of you to think about, consider your proposed business activity, including goods, services you will provide in Thailand. Because we have to understand your business plans, your business activity first. Thereafter, we could assist you, help you to incorporate your company and keep it symbols and match legals with comply with the legals and the company and your business activity. So what 4 areas, the legal areas that I would propose will cover 4 practices. That would first will corporate law. So the corporate law, I always got frequently asked questions, how much the capital register could put in the company, and how many directors should be appointed. So it's always questions. Do I need a license? So this is one I will show you. Next is about, secondly is employment visa and work permit. I will keep a little bit of concept of employment. What is several pay, and what is the advance notice, and what type of visa and work permit. Then the trendy one will be the Personal Data Protection Act. So everybody business activity at the moment, we cannot avoid to collect the data, how the data is, what is the personal data definitions. I will cover on that. And lastly, intellectual property is some entrepreneur may overlook and think is the last thing to concern. So I will show you how important it is. Okay, so we'll start at the corporate law first. So the first question is, why do you need to incorporate a company in Thailand? So why that? So I would tell you first, there are many different formations of legal business organizations. It can be a partnership, branch office, left office, private company limited, or public company limited. However, as our experience, we believe that a private limited is the most common type of the company structure and is the best for foreigner. So once you incorporate a company, you can more easily obtain a business privileges or promotions under the BOI, or you can register the product. So your product may be drug, cosmetic, foods, medical device, and this is all the control goods. So when you proceed the custom clearance, when you get the product registered, you need to have the company incorporate in Thailand. Also, if you want to establish a factory, factory license, you need to meet the requirements and incorporate a company in Thailand. So next, we talk about how much the capital register is required. So this question I have to back to you because back to the questions that I previously asked. So what is your business activity? So what is your business plan? Will you bring skilled workers or talent people in Thailand? And will you be under the BOI? So they have a lot of, we have to discuss and heads up first. But I will show you, this is a minimum capital requirement first for foreign corporations. So they have 2 million baht in general and 3 million on those risks to enlisting of the Foreign Business Act. And Foreign Business Act, I will show you a bit later of this slide. And then if you want to obtain the factory license, you have to have at least 1 million capital. Or if your business, you decide to, your business fall under in the BOI and you really want to get the promotion and privileges. For example, if you really want to do on international business center, so they're required to have to pay it off in full at least 10 million baht. Or finally, if you want the sponsorship of visa and work permits, they will need pay up capital in full at least 2 million baht per foreigner. And still for one, I will talk a bit later in the work permit about the criteria. Next, how many directors will be appointed in the company? So in general, director can be Thai or foreign, that's fine, no need to be reside in Thailand. However, some district restriction apply for certain types of business. Example, land. Then the number of remuneration will be of the director will be fixed by the general meeting of the shareholder. The shareholder will fix how much remunerations and number of director will be appointed to sit on board. Then determine whether a company is Thai or foreign. It depends on the number of shareholders by Thais and foreigners. So I would like you to see the pie chart, and the shareholders will be divided in 100%. And if 51% Thai, that will be considered a Thai company. Why? If 50% owned by foreigner, that company will consider to foreign company and is be subject to Foreign Business Act. And once your foreign company under the Foreign Business Act, we have 3 lists to look at the back, whether you need a license or not. So the first list is totally banned. So reserved for Thai national only. Foreigner cannot do or operate these activities. For example, journalistics enterprise, broadcast radio station enterprise, television station enterprise. And then for the list 2 is about national safety, security, and affect arts, culture, custom, traditions, local craft, or national resources and environment. So for the group 1, I will give you example. For the safety, can be war material, can be ship, aircraft, military vehicles. And the group 2 will be affect arts, for example, for the production of Thai silk, where Thai silk is really famous. And the group 3, natural resources, it can be a transformation of furniture or utensils. And for the list 3, this business Thai people not yet ready to compete with foreigner. So foreign majority company can engage in these provided they get a foreign business certificate. They will be both services, goods and services. If the goods will be rice milling, production of flour, or from rice or farm crop. If it's a service, there will be accounting, business service, law service, architect service, engineer service. This is on the list T. And so previously I talked about the foreign business license, but these slides will talk particularly for the US company, and we can join another privilege only for the US nationals, US company, to get under the US-Thai Amity Treaty promotions. The general requirements will be 51% shares must hold by Americans or Thai citizens. 50% of director must be American or Thai citizen. And generally, the minimum capital required 2 million baht in general or 3 million baht for a certain business activity. And still, they have private business activity reserved for Thai. For example, communications, transportations, banking involving dispository function, or Thai authority would include finance business. And then I would note a little bit, if you company, your American company, and get licensed under the US-Thai Amity Treaty, still you cannot own the land, and you have to obtain the visa work permit in the same position as other foreigner, because it's not included in the treaty. And another privilege will be BOI. BOI is a fantastic office, so they're quite responsive. They try to enhance the investments, national competitiveness, and encourage research development. So there are mainly two benefits. There will be a tax incentive and non-tax incentive. The tax incentive, they can exempt for corporate income tax for up to 13 years, or they can have exemption for import duty on machineries, raw or essential material used in production for export, because Thailand is the economy based on the export as one part of our GDP. And for non-tax will be permit to own land, being skills, workers, and expert to work in the Kingdom of Thailand. So you can see that if you arrive at Suvarnabhumi Airport, Bangkok Airport, you will see they have a fast track lanes for the BOI lanes. You can have smooth enter past the immigrations easier. And then BOI have a category. If your business fall under a category, I would recommend you to apply for the BOI. However, they have the gradings, levels of the privilege. Some of privilege, they will have only non-incentive tax, for example, for permit to own land or bring the skilled workers into Thailand, but non-tax privileges. So a little bit, I know it's quite overwhelming, but I would like you to see the whole picture of the corporate. I would a little bit sum up what I do. I will assess you first whether your company will be Thai majority owned or the foreigner owns. And after that, we'll check in the BOI first whether your business category, your business activity fall under BOI or not. If fall under BOI, we would recommend you to apply to BOI because you can enjoy both tax incentive or non-tax incentive. But apart, if we look at carefully and that it doesn't exist any business, your business activity, we would advise you to look in the FBA Act. So your Foreign Business Act at the list, the list 2 and list 3, whether you are on those lists or not, or your company is American company, we will fast track or apply privilege the license under legal system is the civil law. We have legislation, we have regulation, and the judge have to follow the code, not the precedent case. Unlike in the UK, Malaysia, Singapore, they have to follow by the case law. And this is a general idea of the Thai legal system. And why I say that? Because Labor Protection Act, we have Labor Protection Act to protect employee, and Labor Protection Act is a minimum requirement according to the law. So if you set agreements between your employee that have the lower benefit than the LPA, the Labor Protection Act, then that clause written in the contract will be, we cannot enforce. There will be cancelled when the case to the court. So Thai labor law is really pro-employee. For example, the court, the labor court have no, and they can assist employee in filing claims against the employers. We adopt the severance pay principle. So employee who work 120 days or more will have right to receive severance pay in case of the employment contract is terminated without cause. So without cause, it means they have not committed the criminal offense, they not make a damages against the employer. So this is with cause. So if they with cause, they would not get any severance pay. So the maximum severance pay is 400 days current salary of our employee with 20 or more years of service. And then we'll have to add one notice. Employees are entitled to notice the termination of employment. So in this concept, it's come from, the negotiation between employer and employee is not in the same level. So employee is higher, and when the employer want to terminate the employee contract, if they want to terminate immediately, that will affect the life of employee. So they should give them one full wait period in order to let their employee to seek a new job on that. So they still have a living, still have a pay. If the employer decide, no, I cannot, you have to make a payment in lieu of at one notice instead. So they will protect employee to have money for living during the take a new job. For the visa and work permits, we have talked about in some country, these will synchronize. These will be only one government agency. However, in Thailand, it's a little bit flag about Thai visa will be responsible Immigration Bureau, whereas work permit will be Department of Employment. So they will work differently. But anyway, if you want to work in Thailand, you have to arrive on visa non-B. B stands for business. And you have to apply for the work permit as well. And I'm not going to end up the visa and work permit because it's quite detailed. And I think about at the moment, due to the COVID-19, we will see a great changing of the history of traveling, world traveling, and bubble travel will become to enforce. And we have the late fact on this that will change our history of traveling. Next is about Personal Data Protection Act, the PDPA. As a business operate at the present, we have to, when we log into applications, we queuing, we always receive, we have the business need to collect the personal data of the client. And we have to really careful about this. This law will come in force soon. So a little bit of principles. So Thailand has a role models of this regulation from General Data Protections, GDPR. Thai personal data protection is very similar to GDPR. A lot of GDPR provisions are in the PDPA. So next we talk about personal data. What does it mean? So mean is any information relating to a person which enables the identification of such person, whether directly or indirectly, but not include deceased person. So what it means, so my name is Sopon Tumrat Waragun, so it's my personal data, is identify my identity and is me. My date of birth, my blood type, my religions, all of this is the data. And when you want to collect my data, you have to ask for the consent in a general requirement. And be careful, data subject can have a right to withdraw consent at any times. However, there is some exceptions. For example, I will give you an example scenario. If a patient in a hospital, the COVID-19, and they need to get blood tests for the patient, they're in coma, he or she is not awake, and we need to know his blood type. The doctor had no choice, so he decided to claim by vital interest to get his blood test and find which blood group is, and then you have to save his life. So this is an exception on that. So back to your questions, have you prepared your data protection procedure and policy? This is a really important. You can put the clause in your employment agreements as well. The company which you use the employee, personal data on with objective and require the consent from the employee since the beginnings of the employment agreement as well. And at the moment, last month, the government has delayed the enforcement of PDPA until 2021 for most companies, depending on the business. So I think you have some time to carefully look at your internal company. How do you collect the data? How the data flow? How the data processing? And are you ready if the data subject want to withdraw the consent? Next, this is the last legal concern that I would propose is intellectual property that I mentioned. Most of the entrepreneur may overlook on this. So why is intellectual property? It's back to come to the business activity that I previously mentioned. If you are tech company, you need to register patent first in Thailand before entering to the market. If not, they will have lots of IP infringements. They don't have any protection in your innovation from other competitive. And I will give you a scenario. For example, this is a phase by our clients, and then these clients, they have really big business in China. They haven't things about to work in the business in Southeast Asia at all. So they focus on China, and want to China, their business is skyrocket growth, 10%, 20%, 30% each year. And their trademark, their brands have really high value in China, and they have a person who know the brand and stole that trademark or brand to register in Thailand. And Thailand, we based on first file application. So these store persons can file the application without our client in China. They don't know what happened here. And then they know when they want to register in Thailand, it's too late because the store person that their store trademark is already granted a certificate. So they have the full right according to Trademark Law Act. So, they have the way you can revoke and cancel that trademark. However, it takes 2 years. Is of value or not, because you have to take 3 years to find a law. Excuse me. Yes. And
Kundi, you are on mute.
Okay. Okay, and then you lose 3 years business opportunity to do the legal actions, and finally you have to pay that store person $1 million baht or something like that to return your trademark back to you. And this is a really challenging for so that's why I do recommend to register trademarks as soon as possible. Pay cheaper than pay more, and you affect your cost. So I also have a useful link for you for the all participant webinar. So we'll be on the sections for the business development department. They will have the list. If you not catch up my slide, you can click the link that I provide. They have the list of business activity. You can further study more. Or if you have questions about your extract entity, they will have the information here. Or you want to have the guideline for the BOI investment. We have Chinese, Japanese links we get from the BOI. BOI is really great government agency, and a little bit our newsletter and the person data protections available at our website. So from my side, thank you so much to having me here. If you want to tell us about your business activity, and we will help you to assess preliminary access, how your business with license you could obtain, what is the best option for you. And we also for the Chinese clients, 我们也有中文服务台提供为中国客户的方便。如您对泰国法律有疑问或对本所有兴趣，可以随时加这个微信练习我们。谢谢。ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Sopon. Thank you very much for today. I think, and that is all for today. And I think we have a little more time for questions. And we got from Ashin, right? We got a question from Ashin about FDI law. I think, Sopon, can you help him with that? He asked about current FDI laws less strict for lead companies to have majority shareholding. Are there ongoing discussion to provide further relaxations from FDI perspective? If yes, what are those businesses and sectors?
For the FDI at the moment, the government is straightforward. They haven't not had any relaxation at the moment. And so they will straightforward on the list. They will check on the list. Not on the list, you're still under the FBA, the Foreign Business License Act. However, you don't need the license. You can operate, for example, for the set up the manufacturing here. You can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, if I may add on to that, it's sometimes a bit confusing as Gundi explained it very clearly. There are many options, many licenses, many bilateral treaties and exempt activities. And the first question is, what are you doing in Thailand? Like, what are you planning to invoice or do here? While there is no relaxation per se from the Foreign Business Act, there has been some last year which only relate to group companies in Thailand for intercompany transactions like leasing to subsidiaries of the same group and so on. But it doesn't really apply for inbound investors, you know. But other venues like the Board of Investment, they offer a complete workaround. So if the investment business plan fits into one of the categories, then there is no question anymore, and the company can be 100% foreign owned. In countries like Philippines or Indonesia, for example, you would have like a negative investment list, which is issued every year or so or regularly, where they would switch and adjust the percentage of ownership that foreigners can own per industry and per activity, right? So if you open a restaurant, you can have X% and so on. So in Thailand, it's not really like that. And like Kundi explained very clearly, the Foreign Business Act is more of a binary, you know, either you can or you can't, or you have to look at all the types of licenses.
And thank you, Thomas. And anyone else has any more questions? Okay. So look like we answer all questions today, just only one question. But if anyone has more questions after this meeting, this webinar, you can drop the email to me, and I can coordinate with Thomas and Sopon and make sure that your answer is on its way. And Thomas and Sopon, do you have anything else to add on today?
So my part, if you let us be your part of your business success, so we will help you, assist you as a unit center to check all the legals and compliances to under the Thai law, and you can focus straightforward doing your business and earn the profits and incomes. This is my recommendation.
Thank you. Okay.
Very briefly, well, thanks for the opportunity, and we hope that the webinar has been useful to you. And if you decide to set up an incorporation in Thailand, TMF will be here to help you, especially with the back office functions for accounting, tax, the upkeep for corporate secretary, and so on. And if you have questions or you still feel that it's not certain on which jurisdictions you're planning to invest, we have issued a report called the Global Complexity Index 2020, which compares the market entry difficulty and based on different criteria. A little bit similar to what the World Bank is doing, but more B2B oriented. On, for example, how long it takes to open a bank account, how long to dissolve a company. If you need me to send that report to you, please send us an email and I'll be happy to share it with you.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that is all for today. And we appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.